Okay, the YouTube is up and the screen should be shared. Everybody's seen the Mishnah, yes? Hello? Did I lose everyone?
Yeah, I can see it.
There we go. Okay. It got too quiet. I was scared.
Are we on 10:4?
We are on 10:3.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yep.
That's my new.
And I can see Jose. Oh, that's the new one for school.
My new tools.
How's virtual teaching working out in the public school system?
Improving. The kids, most of them are doing things. Comparing the side of the real estate that is completely dead.
Yeah, right. I didn't think you'd be showing many houses right now.
No, everything is virtual. It's very interesting. They move everything virtual. Also, appraisal is virtual. Everything is virtual. Signing documents, loans, closing, everything is virtual today.
That's a quick adaptation.
Because there was a process. It's funny that they were, for example, one of the lenders that we use,
right?
They launched the new app to do everything digital 2 weeks ago, like perfect timing. And you know that takes time to work in a new app.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially something like that for real estate. I mean, it's not like what we're doing here where, you know, we're teaching and we're doing the best we can, but if there's a mistake in the technology, it's not so bad. But if you're buying a house, everything has to be perfect.
Yeah. No, but I say to everyone, look, if really someone want to buy good price, wait 3-6 months, and the price will be so low that you can buy whatever you want.
No, we'll have to see how things go in 3 to 6 months.
Well, I estimate that we have this corona here in Florida until June, like easily.
Yeah. But let's go ahead and do the Mishnah because that's something we can control.
Do you know how complete will be the closing in Florida? How strict it will be?
No, I don't know. I mean, I saw the announcement from our governor, but I haven't seen the details of what's happening. I know that the basic outline is that if you're not engaged in essential activities, that you should be staying home. But I haven't seen all the details of enforcement or penalties or the full categorization of what counts as essential and when.
Real estate is essential. I can still going out.
All right. Shall we get going?
Sure.
Okay. So we are on chapter 10, Mishnah 3. We are coming up to the end of Bava Batra, the last of the 3 Bavas that we've worked on, not sequentially. We've done them at different times, but this will finish out the Bavas. Originally, when Bava Batra, or sorry, when Bava Kama, Bava Metzi, and Bava Batra were first made, it was actually one volume dealing with all of these different laws that are covered in them. But it was generally felt to be too much for one volume. It was a huge portion of the Mishnah and then later the Gemara, the Talmud. So it was divided into the 3 subsections to make it a little bit more manageable for study and reference. But this is the 3rd part, and we'll see if we can finish it off tonight. If we do, I should point out that as next Wednesday night is Erev Pesach, we will not be having class next Wednesday night. And as the following night is the following week is the end of Pesach, we will not be having class that time either. So tonight will be our last Mishnah for about 3 weeks. And that'll hopefully, if we finish tonight, that'll give us time to prepare for ordering, if we have to, a new volume for the next section that we go into, our next Masechet.
Can I advertise something, Rabbi?
Please.
It's not close, okay, but I'm almost completely convinced my wife, and that's more for Jose, for your family, is that maybe I will stream my Seder Pesach in Zoom. So because I usually I use more Spanish because my in-laws, and also I try to make my daughter to speak Spanish. So probably I will stream in Zoom my Seder Pesach. Mostly will be in Spanish for anyone that want to participate. So they will need let me know, and I will send them a link.
That's very nice of you.
Yeah, because I know that many of people are trying to study, but it's scary for the first time. Uh, all the responsibility to lead the whole Seder.
It's,
Just
it
advertising.
can feel a bit overwhelming.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So, Mishnah, chapter 10, Mishnah 3. I've noticed that most people are not willing to volunteer to read, so I'm just going to jump in and I'll be reading out the bold and correcting the few typos that are still left. I'll try to do better on my typing for the next one, and we're going to go through. We're still continuing our discussion of documents and their officialness or non-officialness, and witnessing or non-witnessing. And we're going to pick up with the issue of a get, in this case, literally the bill of divorce. They may write out a bill of divorce for a man, even if his wife is not with him. All right, so usually if you have two parties that are involved in a transaction, both of them need to be there for the document to be written. However, they are giving permission to write out the get for a man to give to his wife, for the sofer, the scribe, to write that even if the wife is not there, because it is technically the husband's prerogative to initiate the divorce.
I thought that the wife only see the document when she received from the husband. Not, I didn't know that they are. She's also present when they are meeting with the sofer to write down the gate.
So again, we have halacha lamase and we have the halacha from the beginning. So in the beginning, as it was a strictly financial type of situation, you would have the wife present at every stage. However, over time, due to people from both sides trying to monkey with the works, it simply works out to be easier to have the get commissioned with only one spouse there, and to have the get delivered with only one spouse there. But that was a later adaptation, as was, for example, Rabbeinu Gershom's injunction that you couldn't divorce your wife without her consent. That was also a later adaptation. So this is going back a couple thousand years, and it will look a little different than how we practice in the modern world. So the man can write that even if the wife isn't there, and the receipt, which states that the husband has paid out the ketubah for the wife, can also be written even if the husband is not there. In this case, permission is being given to write the receipt on behalf of the wife or the husband, because it is to his benefit to have proof that he has paid, because that clears him of having to pay a second time because he doesn't have proof that he paid. But this is only provided that the scribe actually knows both the husband and wife, so that this can't be just a deception where a person is saying a name, but maybe it's not really their name, or it's somebody else with the same name. We'll get back to that a little bit later tonight. The scribe does need to know both the husband and wife when doing this. And the husband pays the fee for the scribe.
Hey, Rabbi, I got a question.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, before, did you say the wife has to consent to a divorce?
So Rabbeinu Gershom, about 1,000 years ago, made a stipulation that a husband could not just gratuitously divorce his wife. Now, consent does not mean that she can permanently prohibit the divorce. Indeed, the husband can go over her, but it's a more time-consuming endeavor. But for about the last 1,000 years, a divorce has needed to have the wife's consent for it to be handled according to our custom and practice.
And one more question though. You said the scribe has to know both of them, right?
Yes.
To write the divorce. He can't use some kind of paper to verify that he's married to somebody, like the ketubah.
So in the absence of both of them in the ancient world, no, that was not allowed. In the modern world, however, we can use additional witnessing documents that will establish the identity of the husband and the identity of the wife in order to do this, even if we do not have them both present, and even if they're not known to the sofer. Indeed, that's the way that when I'm involved in the creation and delivery of a get, that's usually the way we do it now.
How come a ketubah didn't work back then as a identifying document?
Well, the ketubah identifies that a man and a woman were indeed married. It doesn't necessarily identify that the man you're currently talking to was married to the woman that is now being divorced. You need additional level of witnessing to say, this is exactly the people we are talking about. You know, I can produce a document that says John Smith was married to Mary Jones, and that would be valid for a few thousand people, I'm sure. You need an additional document to say, this John Smith is married to that Mary Jones before I can actually tell you that this is now a valid and binding action.
All right.
Next part of the Mishnah. They may write out a document for the debtor, even though the creditor is not with him, but they may not write out a document for the creditor unless the debtor is with them, and the debtor pays the scribe's fee. So in this case, we're talking about a different sort of loan document. This is where somebody is borrowing money, and the person who is borrowing money, the debtor, is allowed to write out the document which states that he owes so-and-so money, even if so-and-so is not there. That is because the document creates an obligation for the debtor, but it does not create an obligation for the creditor. And therefore, even if the creditor is not there, it's no harm against him. The opposite, of course, is not true, right? A creditor can't go to a scribe and say, write up a contract saying that Mr. Smith owes me $1,000. Oh, no, I know he's not here, but trust me, he does. You can't do that. That's not kosher, to say the least.
What happens if the debitor write and lower sum?
What happens if, I'm sorry, what?
What happens if the debtor write and lower sum of money?
Then the original witnesses to the debt would testify against him as having changed the conditions.
Because the software, maybe he will not know how much was the debt.
It is possible, yes. And that's why you have additional witnessing, not just the single sofer.
So if they write in this way without the creditor, they need to have two witnesses.
Well, no, if the creditor and the debtor would have their agreement witnessed by two witnesses, but then they would draw up a document to verify and ensure that no one misremembered anything. It's the writing of that document that's being handled here. Does that make sense? Okay. And then finally, for buyers and sellers, they may write out a deed of sale for the seller, although the buyer was not with him, but they may not write it out for the buyer unless the seller is with him, and the buyer pays the scribe's fee. So if I'm selling my horse to you, I can write up the deed saying this is my horse and now it's going to belong to Mr. So-and-so, but Mr. So-and-so can't take and say, write up a document saying I bought the horse without the seller present, because again, the opportunities for mischief are far too great. Pretty straightforward, that last one, once you've gotten through the first two parts. Any questions, or shall we roll on? Moving on. Chapter 4, or sorry, Mishnah 4. more about writing and what sort of consent we need. They may not write documents of betrothal or marriage, the erosin and nisuin, the initial betrothal and then the final stage of marriage, except with the consent of both parties. And the bridegroom pays the scribe's fee. Right? You can't say, oh, no, trust me, she's agreed to marry me. You need to actually have the consent from both people. Make sense? They may not write documents of tenancy and sharecropping, except with the consent of both parties. And the tenant pays the scribe's fee.
Why the groom pay the fee?
Because he is the one that is gaining the wife. The general model for marriage is the groom is the one who initiates, the groom is the one who takes a wife, in a broader sense of the usage of the word take. And so therefore he is the primary initiator of this action. And so he will pay for it, just like he pays for the get, again, as the primary initiator. Okay. In this case, the second case, when you are having somebody who is renting a property or who is going to sharecrop the property, they are gaining from that. They are gaining the use of the land. They are gaining the right to be in a particular property. So they are the ones who pay. But again, you need both the landlord and the tenant to be present when that deed is being drawn up. Right, this is because you're creating a mutual relationship. You can't say that the obligation is only on one side. So therefore you need both sides to be there for this obligation to be drawn up. And moving down, just a second. Did this delete another piece again? Just a moment. Let me check my.
No, that's okay. The last one is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel.
What's that?
The last one is Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel.
Excuse me. My hand version here is just pausing. Okay. All right. So yeah, no, we are okay. It's differently worded than the way that I was studying it earlier. So they may not write up documents of arbitration or any document drawn up before a court, except with the consent of both parties. And both parties pay the scribe's fee. That is to say, they split the fee for that deal. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says 2 documents are written for the 2 parties, 1 copy for each. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel loses this argument, but his reasoning is very, very interesting. What he is basically saying is that if you have 2 parties who are involved in a legal dispute, oftentimes they are unwilling to even share the document that is being drawn up as the agreement for arbitration. It's almost as though they are saying, I won't even look over your shoulder at a piece of paper with you that details the court that we are now convening to deal with this. That is the level of acrimony that he was worried about. And so therefore demanded that they each have their own copy to overcome that particular problem. Now, like I said, the halakha does not follow him, but the fact that there were people who were that bitter and engaged in their legal disputes back then, at least makes me feel a little better that it's not only our generation where people can be absolute beasts to each other over these types of issues.
Rabbi, can we make a generalization that who takes initiative act, that individual pay?
It's partly who takes initiative, but usually who takes initiative is also can be described as the person who is gaining, the person who is acquiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like to generalize.
Okay.
That's easier for me to remember, you understand?
Generalizations are nice, except when there are exceptions, and there are always exceptions. All right, moving on to Mishnah 5. All right, so now we're going to deal with the paying back of debts. When somebody has taken out a loan and it's time to pay it back or not pay it back. If a man had paid part of his debt and gave the debt document to a third party, and the debtor said to him, if I have not paid you back by such and such a day, give him back the debt document. And the time came and he had not paid, Rabbi Yosef says, he should give it back to him. Rabbi Yehuda says he should not give it to him. Okay, let me explain. You've got, I wish I had my whiteboard. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Will this work? I've been trying to work better on my annotations. Let's see if I've got things down here. All right, so we've got Mr. A and we've got Mr. B. Right? Mr. B gave money to Mr. A, right? Mr. B is the loaner. He's the one who actually gave the loan. Mr. A gave back some of the money to Mr. C, but he also gave him the debt document, meaning the collateral deed is the way this is usually meant.
But why I give money to C if I'm not directly to B?
Ah, okay. Why not directly to B? Because as we're going to see in a later Mishnah, if you pay back a debt partially, it can create other issues with the receipt and an obligation format. So what he is doing is basically giving money to C, but he's also giving him this collateral note for the value of the full debt. And he tells C, if I don't give you the rest, then you can give this to B. Now he doesn't want that to happen, because if this document goes off to B and the money goes off to B, then that means B got more than the original loan. Right? This plus this is greater than that.
But what is the gain of C?
No, C gains nothing. C is just being a neutral third party.
So take a responsibility, because if something happened to the money, C need to pay back. If someone stole the money or lose. So why takes a responsibility if there's nothing for him?
Because he's a good person.
That's why if he lost the money, we learn that he need to pay back from his money.
Which is why he shouldn't lose the money.
Okay.
Okay, so the idea is that they want to make sure that the document doesn't get to be prematurely. The issue that the Gemara, the Talmud raises about this is that when A made the agreement to give back part of the money plus the document, he really only meant the document to be incentive that he should finish off the payment. You know, it's kind of like, saying, cross my heart and hope to die, stick a needle in my eye. When someone says that, they don't really mean it. They are just showing that they truly are committed to finishing off the payment. Rabbi Yosef says, doesn't matter. If the document is in C's possession with those rules, then it needs to go all the way to B. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, this was merely meant as a statement of intention. It was not meant as the original plan, because the original plan was only to pay back the original amount. And therefore, we should not assume that A was willing to forfeit his down payment and the debt document as well. And Rabbi Yehuda wins the argument through the Talmud. If you're finding that confusing, good. We're going to come back to just how confusing all of this can be when we get a little bit later on.
So what happened if, for example, A give part of C, okay,
Right.
C give to B, but not all, but after a year, A say to C, here is the rest of the money, because I had a better season, and I produce a lot.
Okay, so
Can he close all the loan in this way? In,
it,
in
it
two
depends on
statements?
it depends on the timeline. So if the debt was due at the time when he was supposed to give the document, then once that document doesn't go, according to Rabbi Yehuda, then the whole situation goes to the court. And then the court, assuming B doesn't have some other way of compromising, the court would then decide how to take the remainder from A's property. So that would be the default. If the loan wasn't due yet, then of course A can continue to make payments on the loan right up until the actual due date for the final payment. Make sense? Okay, so let's go.
Rabbi, one question.
Yes.
Is this loan forgiven in the 7th year?
Yes, unless the Prusbal has been initiated, which allows loans to be collected afterwards. But that's a whole nother conversation. So for the moment, for the sake of argument, yes, as a vanilla loan, it would be forgiven.
But after the time has passed and they had a judgment, then it doesn't get forgiven, right?
Well, no, if there was already a judgment against them, then it's no longer a loan. Now it's an actual judgment by the court. But of course, loans were always made with the idea of the 7th year and the remission of loans in mind. So it wouldn't be like the creditor would be surprised by that.
Right.
All right, moving on to 10.6, more debts. And yeah, it's not only our generation that has debt. People have been having debt for a very long time. Okay, so if a man's debt document was erased, he must have witnesses testify with regards to the loan and come before the court to make this attestation. So-and-so, the son of so-and-so and so, his debt document was erased on such and such a day, and so-and-so and so-and-so are his witnesses, excuse me. So what's going on here? Well, they didn't have amazing laser printers and all of that sort of thing. These are all handwritten documents. These were documents that would just be set aside. And over time, they would eventually begin to fade or could even become damaged by the elements. So if the document is erased or about to be erased, there's a debate of exactly what's happening here, then you need to get witnesses to come and testify before the court that the document is indeed valid. And usually what they would do would be write a new document to ratify the old document that is now fading. So this was a way of keeping the document and keeping the loan alive, even though the original piece of paper was beginning to fall apart. Make sense? Of course. If a man paid part of his debt, Rabbi Yehuda says he should exchange the debt document for a new one. Basically, I paid 50%, so now we have a new debt, and the new debt is for the remaining 50%. Rabbi Yossi says he should write a receipt, meaning you should get a document from the original person who you loaned it to that says you paid 50%. Rabbi Yehuda says it turns out that this one, that the person who has the receipt, will have to guard his receipt from mice. Rabbi Yossi stated to him, that's good for him, as long as the rights of the other, meaning that they have not been damaged, right? So what they're arguing about here is who has the obligation? Does the person who is waiting to continue to collect the rest have the obligation to show that he has only this much left? Or does the person who has paid have the obligation to keep proof that he has paid this much so far? It is interesting to know that in the Gemara, this is one of the rare occasions where neither of the two named rabbis wins. Neither Rabbi Yehuda nor Rabbi Yossi win. Instead, the position that the Gemara reaches is that you should write a new loan document for the remainder, but it should be dated from the time of the original loan. Now, Why is that important? Well, for those of you who have been with me for a while, this may sound familiar. For those of you who are new, this may sound weird. If I have an outstanding loan that is mortgaged against my property, then when I am selling my property, the buyer has to know that if I default on the loan, the original creditor could come after the property even though I've already sold it. Right? If I sell property with a lien against it, that property remains susceptible as collateral for the loan. I have no idea if that's how it works in modern real estate law, but that is definitely how it works in Jewish law. So therefore, if you post date, if you were to write the receipt, as Rabbi Yehuda first said, as a new debt, then that would mean any property that had been sold from the date of the original debt to the date when he is now paid off part of it and getting his new debt document, all of that selling would now be clear, and you would never be able to attach it as a lien if he fails to pay the remainder of his money. And that's something that the Gemara says isn't fair, that the property that was written as a lien in the first debt should remain as property available for collection should he fail to pay his second part. Everyone confused?
Hey, Rabbi, quick question.
Yes.
I thought I read somewhere else that they could write on the loan document paid whatever, 50%.
What do you mean? Mean like that's a receipt?
All right. Oh, but I thought the receipt means give him a sheet of paper. I'm talking about on the actual debt document.
Oh, you mean on the document that's in the possession of the creditor?
Yeah, I thought they could write on it as he gave him the money, paid whatever, $200, and then have them both sign.
Sure. And if you're willing to allow that proof of your payment to remain in the possession of the creditor, then that's perfectly fine and valid. However,
Right.
Most people like having a receipt. Most people liked having some proof that they only owed X amount.
Right, but that'd be you could do both though, right? To have a double thing in case mice ate your receipt.
Yes, you can definitely create more and more documents. But the main issue here is trying to protect the right of the creditor to have the lien against the property that was originally in the possession of the debtor when the loan was initiated. Make sense?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, flying today. I don't know if that's because we all understand it or because it's so complicated that it's hard to understand. Okay, Mishnah 10:7. We're changing topics a little bit here. We're now dealing with some of the odd cases that can crop up. The first one is dealing with an inheritance that is difficult to share. If there were two brothers, one poor and one rich, and their father left them a bathhouse or an olive press, if the father had made them for hire, the profit is split equally. But if he made them for his own use alone, the rich brother may say to the poor brother, buy yourself slaves and they can wash in the bathhouse, or buy for yourself olives and prepare them in the olive press. Okay. Father has a large amount of property, and on the property he has this bathhouse and he has the olive press. He has two sons. When he leaves his property, he gives them as a gift to both of them to share, right? So they're not dividing the value of them. They are sharing in the use of the property. Everyone with me so far? Good. If the father had already been renting these things out, letting people pay to use the bath, letting people pay to use the olive press, then they can continue to be rented out and the profit would be split evenly between the rich brother and the poor brother. That part seems pretty obvious. However, if they had not been rented out, if the father just used them for himself in his own estate, then they must remain that way unless both brothers agree to begin renting them. Which means the rich brother can say, look, we're going to keep the bathhouse and the olive press as private family property. And if you want to use them with whatever you've got, go ahead. but we're not going to turn them into public for rent opportunities, and therefore you won't benefit from it equally compared to me, right? Because I'll benefit more because I have more people to use the bath and I have more olives to use the press. But that's perfectly fine because it still is owned by both of us.
It's not much easier. The poor brothers say, pay me my part and buy my part.
He can certainly try to be bought out from the property as a partner, but presumably he would prefer to have the profit from rental of the property rather than being bought out at a one time.
But that's abuse.
Well, no, so that's what the Mishnah is trying to clear up. I threw in the ha, sorry. But what the Mishnah is trying to clear up is, if the father leaves a car to be used by the two children, but only one of them knows how to drive, then that doesn't mean the other one can say, well, we should just rent the car out to people instead. They can say, no, look, if you want to use the car, learn to drive. But in the meantime, the car was left to us by our father. I'm not going to turn it into a rental property. I'm not going to necessarily sell it unless you want to sell your part to me, just because you can't properly use the property. If a parent leaves their library to their children, but it's in a language that only one of them can read, that doesn't mean that that the one who can't read it is able to force the other to turn it into a lending library. If you want to read the books our father left, learn the language.
Yeah, but those are different examples, Rabbi, because your example is about there's not profit in the middle. Here there's economical profit. There's a completely different level.
There could be profit, but that doesn't mean there has to be. Yes, you could make the bathhouse a profit center. You could make the olive press a profit center. And if it already was, then the rich brother is not allowed to shut it down. He can't say from now on it's only private. If it was already open to being rented, then it has to remain open. And the rich brother doesn't get to shut it down. But if it was already private and that was the way the father used it, the poor brother can't force the rich brother to open it up. He can still use it. Maybe he doesn't have a lot of olives. Maybe it's only himself and his family going to use the bathhouse. So maybe it seems like one is benefiting from the gift more than the other, but that's not an abuse of either person. It is simply a feature of which person can use it by their own ability, not by some malicious decree. Now, the father may have intended it badly. I don't know. Families are weird, but that doesn't seem to have been the main issue. But the fact that you feel this is perhaps unfair is precisely why the Mishnah had to come and teach us that no, in this case, it is okay.
It's okay.
It's what the Mishnah is, what the Mishnah is.
No, that it's okay that the brother can do this to the youngest brother.
I mean that the rich brother can do this to the poor brother? Mm-hmm. Yes, because he's not doing anything to him. He's not changing anything from how the property was used while their father was still alive.
Yeah, but it has the potential, right? Also, I disagree. It has the potential to benefit. There's money in the middle, and also it's impossible for one of the brothers to develop all the potential of the land because he can't. So it's a question of forcing the other brother to say, you know what, look at me, how actually I use unilateral and use only by myself the land because you cannot use. Great. So we are sharing in paper, but actually whoever will receive benefit from the land, it's me, not you.
But that's not the rich brother's fault. It's not the poor brother's fault. It's simply the facts on the ground. Again, take another property example. If a parent dies and leaves the vacation house to their children, and only one of them gets 3 months vacation, the other gets 1 week vacation. That doesn't mean that the 1 week vacation child can force the other one to go ahead and turn it into an Airbnb in the meantime. If it's a private house, it's a private house. And just because one of them happens to be in a position to enjoy the fruits of this inheritance a bit better, doesn't mean that they are abusing the situation. Now, if there is a horrible discrepancy and indeed the poor brother is desperate, then we would hope that the rich brother would support their poor brother, but there's not the obligation that they do it in this particular way. Natan?
Yes. Well, I can give you a counter argument, okay? Like, let's say that we slump the budget of the education system, public education, okay? So, we help charter school and more than charter private school, and beautiful private school, very expensive, like Trinity or like Highland, and you have all the junky the public school because there's nothing. And you say, well, you know what? Every citizen can have the same opportunity to benefit and to improve their life. I don't force you to use the private school. It's there. Like I give you the public school, it's there. You will not achieve anything, but it's there. It's the same. And you know that not both of them will have the same opportunity in life, because already there's one that have more benefit and more opportunity than the other one. The same happened with here. Oh yes, the bath is here, the olives are there. Hey, are there. You can use it. You can because you don't have the money, but it's your problem. It's there. So I use it and I can benefit twice more than you. That's really, it's not the same situation. It's a very
But I mean,
exploitative.
the comparison is not fair, because no one is telling the poor son that he needs to pay more to use it. No one is telling him that there is a fee to use what has been left to him by his father. It's useful by both.
Yeah.
And if let's just use this. Let's turn this into a pure cash amount, and maybe you'll see what they're going for here. Let's imagine that the father dies and he leaves 100 gold coins for one brother, for the rich brother, and 100 gold coins for the poor brother. But the rich brother has many business opportunities, many connections, many different trading partners, and the poor brother has many debts. The money that goes to the poor brother, yes, it will help him, it will pay off some of the debts, but most likely it's going to sort of just not change his life completely. The extra 100 coins for the rich brother, on the other hand, he may be able to turn into a great profit through doing different trade. Does that mean that it was unfair that the father left them both the same amount? Does that mean that the poor brother should have been able to take from the rich brother and force the rich brother to give him part of the inheritance so that they would be equalized? You know, this is the thing where Judaism does not fit neatly into modern political economic theories.
No, it's not right, but it's about the potential. Like I disagree, because for me it's the same example. For example, the education is there, you have there. You can go and pay an private school, and you don't do it, it's your problem. So we can continue reducing the taxes. That in this case, okay.
Doesn't mean you have to pay for
but it's there. In this case, with the bathroom and the olives are there. You can use it. I don't force you to use it. However, you cannot, because you don't have the tools to use it. It's like they give you a beautiful mansion and they don't give you the key. Oh, the mansion is there. You cannot go inside. You cannot live there. The house is there. Okay.
No, but you do have the key. That's why your example with the school is not a correct example, because the school has a gate, and the gate has a key that's made of money to get into a private school. No one is saying that the poor brother has to pay to access any of these benefits that are being left. He has 100% access.
Yeah, but he cannot use it.
He can use it, but he doesn't get as much benefit.
How can develop?
What?
He cannot have the tools to develop anything.
But that's not his brother's fault. That there's no one who has done this deliberately. No one has cheated the younger, not the younger, they could be reversed, younger, older. No one has cheated the poor brother.
Not directly, but yes, indirectly. That's the part that I understand your point of view. Okay, I understand what you say. And it's not cheated directly, but it's cheating indirectly.
Okay, so if land is set aside by the state for a park, is that fair to both poor and rich? The rich have more leisure time. They have more opportunity to come and use it. The same thing can be said whenever money is being used for the arts.
But
The rich,
park cannot produce more money. That's different. Here is something that can produce more. Okay, and also park you cannot go and work and you don't need to invest anything. In the other side, in the example of the Mishnah, you need to invest in order to produce and have benefits. In the park, no, the park is free. You don't have to invest anything in order to produce benefits for you. In this case of the olives at the bathroom, yes, you need to invest. So it's actually a bad comparison.
all right, so rather than the park, have a library. You have to invest time. You have to invest your own efforts to get the benefit from a public library. Does that mean that it discriminates against people who have to work 2 jobs? Well, kind of, by your logic. It's not fair that it's only available for people who have the time to use it. And therefore, we shouldn't put money into making this available. But that's not the real answer. But it's not that it's discriminating against them. It is simply that there are other issues at hand. Yes, one is poor, one is rich, and that will change the outcome. But that doesn't mean that the opportunity was skewed or unfair in the first place. And that difference of protecting the equal opportunity or protecting equal outcome is a very difficult point of debate. And the Mishnah and Judaism are not always clearly on one side or the other. Like I said, it doesn't fit neatly into modern categories. Remember that the Mishnah is equally worried about taking money away from a rightful owner, even if the rightful owner is wealthy, and giving it to the unrightful owner, the unlawful owner, even if the unlawful owner is very much the deserving poor. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. I knew that would get a lot of debate. But let's move on to part 2, which is a little bit less controversial, I think. If there were 2 in the same town, meaning 2 people, and one's name was Joseph, the son of Shimon, and the other's name was Joseph, the son of Shimon, neither can bring forth a debt document on the other, and another person cannot bring forth a debt document against them. Right? If I say Joseph, the son of Shimon, owes me $100, how do I know which one? That document is inadequate. If some person finds among their documents a document that states the debt document of Joseph ben Shimon is paid, both of their debt documents are paid. We assume that both Joseph ben Shimon's are clear and done. So that would be a problem. What should you do instead? They should write their names to the 3rd generations. Joseph, the son of Shimon, the son of Jacob, or Joseph, the son of Shimon, the son of Isaac. You need to put another generation on it to make it clear. And if the names are the same through the 3rd generation, they should give themselves a sign. Joseph, the son of Shimon, the son of Jacob, who was the baker, or who lived at this particular address. Give some other way of identifying it than just the names. And if their signs are the same, then there should also be an additional level, such as writing that the person is a Kohen. So if they both happen to be bakers, but one of them is Joseph, the son of Shimon, the son of Jacob, the Kohen, then that would be a better way to differentiate. Basically, there's always some way that you can identify a person if you are worried that there will be confusion in identities.
So can you use also the mom?
Oh, yeah, any additional information that's available, whether it be the mother's name, whether it be the address, whether it be some distinguishing feature, the guy with only one eye, whatever is necessary to make it clear who you're talking about. All right. If a man said to his son, and this is when he is dying, one of my debt documents is paid, and I do not know which one, meaning I know that one of the people who owes me money has paid off the money that they owe me, but I don't know which one of the people who owe me money has actually paid. He's really bad at record keeping. Then all are deemed to be paid, right? 100%, everybody who owes him money, they now just got a free pass. Because if you can't say for sure who does owe, you have no right to take money from anyone. Because how can you tell, right? We got 10 people. I know one of them has already paid. The other 9 haven't. But each of the 9 could say, I was the one who paid. And yes, 9 of them are lying, but one of them is telling the truth. And if I don't know which one, how can I force any of them to give money when it would be actually theft from at least one of them? If 2 documents were found among the documents written to the same debtor, then the larger one is considered to have been paid, but the smaller one is not paid. So if Mr. Smith has owed $100 and Mr. Smith took another loan for $50, the $100 is forgiven, it's waived, but he does still have to pay the $50 because the assumption is he said one of them was paid, but there's 2 against you. I know at least one of them is still due, and we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and we will say it's the more expensive one that was paid, and that means you owe the less expensive one. Questions, comments?
Hey, Rabbi.
Yes.
Does this assume that there's no admission from the real debtor?
Yes, of course. If any of the people who actually took out the money and who know that they have not paid wants to go and pay anyway and give money to the son, to the heir, when they are saying that there is this problem, they are absolutely allowed to pay. But the court cannot force them to pay. They can't force an admission.
But if they admit in open court, it's still adjudicable, right?
Yes. If they are willing to say, yes, I still owe this, then it will continue as a debt.
All right.
You always are allowed to do the right thing. Just rare that sometimes happens. All right. If a man lent money to his fellow on a guarantor's security, all right, we've got Bob. Bob wants to take out a loan, but Tom does not want to give Bob a loan because he doesn't trust Bob. So Frank says, don't worry, I'll cover for Bob. If Bob can't pay, I'll pick up the tab. All right, that's what a guarantor for the loan means. If that's the situation, you may not exact payment from the guarantor. It's like, wait, what? Right, so if that was the way you just laid it out and you gave no more information, then you do not actually get to go after the guarantor for the payment, which seems very contrary of what guarantor means. But if he said, on the condition that I may exact payment from whom I wish, then he may exact payment from the guarantor. Right? A guarantor who says, you can take it from me, and in the loan document it says, I can take it from either of them, then indeed the creditor can take the property from the guarantor if the initial person cannot pay. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, if the borrower had property, in neither case can he exact payment from the guarantor. Meaning that, no, even if you say he can take from whoever he wishes, if the original debtor does actually have property that could be used to pay it back, then you have to go after the original debtor. Moreover, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel used to say, if a man was a guarantor for a woman's ketubah and her husband divorced her, the husband must vow to derive no benefit from her, lest he make a conspiracy against the property of the guarantor and take his wife back again. So Natan, this one's for you. because I know you love the loopholes and the way of taking advantage. So what Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is worried about here is if the man says to his wife, look, there's a guy who's backing up the ketubah that you're owed, right? And I don't have a whole lot of money right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divorce you. The guarantor is going to pay your ketubah, and then I'll remarry you, and we'll be able to split the money. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, no. If somebody else is guaranteeing the ketubah, then the husband has to make a vow that he will not remarry her, that he will have no benefit from her, that he will not be with her ever again, because otherwise you could use this as a conspiracy against the guarantor. Make sense? All right. And
Rabbi Neely,
yeah, yes.
I was gonna say that listening to that, it almost sounds like that happened in one circumstance that they wrote that down.
Oh, I'm sure it happened in probably more than one circumstance. As duplicitous and double dealing and sneaky as people are today, they always have been.
It's human nature.
Well, it's human nature to always have some humans who follow that particular type of behavior. It doesn't mean all of us are like that, but it does mean some of us are like that. And if some of us are like that, we better have a legal system that protects us. All right, the final Mishnah of Bava Batra, of all the Bavas.
I'm looking forward for the end of the Masechet because we already have a very interesting last sentence.
Oh, just wait for it.
Very spiritual.
The last sentence is amazing in this one. I really like it.
Yeah.
Don't look ahead. Don't look ahead. So, if a man lent his fellow money by using a document, he may recover the debt from mortgaged property. But if he had lent only before witnesses and not through the document, he may recover the debt only from unmortgaged property. So, as we've talked before, the document was considered to be a greater level of security. And that means that the debt has greater weight. Secondly, the document also meant, in their day especially, that the debt was public knowledge, that people knew that there had been this debt, which meant that the property, if he had gone to sell it, the buyer would have known that there was a potential lien against that property. Whereas if it was only with private witnesses, that would not have been public knowledge, and therefore the property could not be used as a lien to pay off the debt in the case of a default. And that needed to be understood by everybody involved. Make sense? Part 2. If the creditor brought forth a loan document upon which appeared his debtor's signature as evidence that he was indebted to him, the creditor may recover the debt only from unmortgaged property. Again, if we don't have the additional witnesses and we only have the signature, then we treat this like we would have treated an oral agreement, the lending just with witnesses. And therefore, it can only go on the unmortgaged property for collection.
Rob, I have a question.
Yes.
Is the reason it can't be collected against the land, the unmortgaged property, is that because the other people aren't on notice? Or is it because it carries less weight?
It's precisely because that it wasn't public and other people were not on notice.
Even on the second one where it's just not signed right?
Well, no, it's signed right, but it wasn't signed with witnesses, and therefore it doesn't have the same level of publicity.
Right. So in the second one, since there was no witnesses, would that negate notice to the other people?
Well, yes, and that's why it can only be collected on the unmortgaged property.
All right.
If he has the contract, if he wrote the contract, with 2 witnesses. So he can go against also a mortgage property because there's witnesses.
If there are 2 witnesses, but in our second case, let me scroll back up, right? In the second case, this one, there are no witnesses, or there were witnesses, but they weren't signed. They were, witnessed just verbally rather than actually writing on the document.
Oh, Okay.
Because of that, it can still only go for the unmortgaged property. So, by the way, as a little aside, in modern cases, even though most of our debt documents are now handled in a more private manner than the ancient world, back then everybody's business was everybody's business. The fact is that we do usually deposit major debts in a way that makes them part of the public interest. They are part of the public record, and so they are considered public, and that's why you can do a title search to make sure if there are liens against property, and why you can do a credit check before you give a loan, and all of those other things. That's kind of taken the place of public knowledge in the ancient world. If a man signed as a guarantor after the signature of witnesses, the creditor may recover the debt only from the guarantor's unmortgaged property. Such a case came before, sorry, let's make sure we get that first before we go to the case. Right, so you've made a debt and the witnesses have signed it, and then somebody else says, I will go ahead and also be a guarantor on this. Because it came after the witnesses, it will only allow the guarantor's unmortgaged property to be available in the case of a collection. He should have been signed above the witnesses is what they're talking about. Now, let's do a real case, and this is the wind-up for our big conclusion. Such a case came before Rabbi Ishmael, and he said he may recover only from unmortgaged property, which is what we just saw. Ben Nanos said to him, he may recover the debt neither from mortgaged nor unmortgaged property. He can't get any collection at all from the guarantor. He said to him, why? He answered, if a man seized the debtor by the throat in the street and his fellow found him and said, leave him alone and I'll pay, he is not liable, since not through trust in him did the creditor lend the debt money. So what he's saying here, Ben Nanos, is look, if he signed later on in the document, that was only to try and make the creditor stop behaving so badly. And when the creditor first chose to give the loan, he didn't choose to give the loan based on the good name of the guarantor, because the guarantor wasn't on the document. And since he never intended to give the loan based on the reputation of the guarantor and was only having the guarantor on the document because he was behaving so badly, we, the court, are not going to back him up, the creditor, and allow him to now take the money from this guy who only put his name on the document to make him stop harassing the poor debtor. We following the logic?
So, Rabbi,
yes,
you have to have a quid pro quo for to be a guarantor, then, huh?
In which way?
Well, I shouldn't say that. According to Nanos, you need a quid pro quo. Basically saying you have to, somebody has to get something in return for you signing as the guarantor.
Well, it had to be that the guarantor was part of the original deal, is what Ben Nanos is saying. If the guarantor wasn't part of the original deal, then he wasn't a guarantor, right? It wasn't that the creditor loaned because of the guarantor. He loaned when he loaned without knowledge that the guarantor would ever appear.
Right. So the guarantor is not getting anything in return, which means there's no, I guess they use consideration or quid pro quo.
I'm not 100% sure of the technical terms in American legal theory, but the guarantor is not benefiting from this in any way, except by being a noble person. So
right.
rather, which type of guarantor is liable? If a man said, lend him money and I will pay you, then he is liable, for he lent him through his trust in the guarantor. That counts as a real guarantee. Okay, so Rabbi Ishmael, what does he say in response to all of this? And Rabbi Ishmael said, he who wants to be wise, let him occupy himself with cases dealing with monetary matters. For there is no greater branch of Torah than this, for they are like a welling fountain. And he who wishes to occupy himself with laws concerning monetary matters, let him serve as a pupil of Shimon ben Nanos. So he is basically saying, Yasher Koach ben Nanos, that is a beautiful argument. That is, you were absolutely right. And this shows how complicated the money matters are, but understanding them is the greatest branch of all of Torah. So it's taken us a long time to get through all three of the Bavas, which are basically dealing with these monetary matters in many different ways. But understand that, as we have noticed, these are a constant welling fountain. There is so much additional information that comes from all of them, and such a stretching of the mind that it is one of the best mental exercises you can possibly have, as well as attuning yourself to the needs of the community in a way that is in much sharper relief than many of the other issues within Torah. The needs of buying and selling, of fairness, of justice, all of these tachlis, practical matters of day-to-day living are an amazing way to see how Torah is meant to occupy us and to move our society in a more righteous and just way. So indeed, you called it, Natan. It's got a great ending.
So next one is Eruvin. We
What's
close that. The next one is Eruvin.
Eruvin, I haven't heard any objections, so we'll go ahead and tackle Eruvin next, but that'll be after Pesach.
So in 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks, exactly. Hold on, I'm at the computer. I can look it up. That will be on the 22nd.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you, Robin, for the show.
Oh, thank you all very much for participating, especially as we continue with these extraordinary circumstances. Any final questions before we sign off?
Hey, I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes.
I actually just was finished reading a book on Maimonides and the merchants, and they would talk about how Maimonides made a big point to connect the halacha with modern society. He tried to make them closer.
I wouldn't necessarily say that he tried to make them closer. I mean, he certainly tried to make things understandable and relevant to his community. You know, the issue is always one of if the local statutes and economy in particular is very, very different from what it was during the days of the Mishnah, which we've talked about in many times, then you need to find how the Mishnah would still be applied under those circumstances, or whether or not it needs to be applied, and whether or not the local laws, statutes, customs, economy are sufficient. So that's something that not only Rambam, but every generation has always wrestled with. If the local economy handles monetary matters very, very differently, then how do we make sure that it still works and is still compliant with Judaism? Right.
And one of the things they talk about is that they think Maimonides was afraid that had the laws not been adapted so well, that the local Jewish community would act for the Muslim courts.
Well, so this is one of the issues that we have in our own day as well, which is not because the Jewish laws have not adapted well, and I think they've actually done very well, but because of the power of secular society and the administration of courts throughout the world now as part of the government power, Judaism very rarely gets to adjudicate according to our own rules. And this has, in many ways, impoverished us spiritually and intellectually. But those are the days we live in. And at the moment, at least, you know, that is the society that we have and that we will continue to support while making sure that we still do operate within the basic understandings of what is right and wrong of Judaism.
I mean, this has also brought many challenges because the issue of Maimonides or Rambam in his time is that he was dealing with the prosecutions of the wars that were going between Muslims and Christians. And he had to actually flee many times because of Muslim rule. And Judaism had to adapt itself, at least this is my understanding, to the rule of the majority. One example of that, it was not until the 10th century that Judaism allowed polygamy, but because of the majority of the Eastern Europe were Christians, they adapted Judaism to fit with the norms of the society at large.
Well, we mentioned Rabbeinu Gershom earlier on when we talked about the idea of divorcing a woman only with her consent. And he was also the leader of the council that made the takana, that made the edict that prohibited polygamy in European communities. So yes, the different adaptations and modifications were within the purview of the rabbinic authorities, but they have made sure that Judaism remains relevant and also not open to scorn or ridicule, as was the case with polygamy.
Yeah, and now that there are changes, like for example, with the homosexual marriage, the sexual revolution, and then also the issues that Israel faced with the Ethiopian Jews, that they still practice polygamy. Those have been challenges that have been brought to Judaism. That still is a challenge that we live today, of how we can adapt Judaism to an ever-changing world.
Well, I mean, that's why the conservative movement's motto is tradition and change. And it's why Judaism classically has always had the element of a continued application of Judaism for the circumstances at hand. Judaism is a living law. It is not something that is trapped in any particular century.
Yeah, I concur. At least we have studied.
Yes.
Very little.
Good night, gentlemen, and good night to everyone else. Keep studying and see you for Mishnah in 3 weeks.
Thank you.